Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com and the Big Four Accounting Firms YouTube channel. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everybody to support us if you have a chance or if you can. Even $1 helps, and we have a link in the description to a website called Buy Me a Coffee. It's just a way to donate to us and support us. Again, any amount is helpful so that we can keep putting out content. And there's also other ways for you to support us in the show notes to this podcast or on YouTube in the description. Today's podcast, we're going to be talking about Deloitte and some news about pay cuts. And we're going to be talking about some really good news for Deloitte. They announced that they're going to repay some of their pay cuts in Australia. Now, as you might remember, Australia is probably the weirdest country we've heard of for the Big Four accounting firms and for COVID. They have crazy COVID lockdowns, and they're all over the place with regards to Big Four accounting firms and their response to COVID. And the reason it's so weird is because Australia is painting this really grim picture, but the Big Four accounting firms have had amazing results in Australia. And as you might remember, all the Big Four accounting firms had pretty good results. Not really any of them had a down year, but all of them went crazy when it came to responding to COVID. We thought the worst case scenarios were going to happen in Australia. Deloitte laid 7% of its workforce off in Australia due to gloomy forecasts. They previously had about 9,000 staff, and this means they cut about 600 to 700 jobs in Australia. And they also cut pay for their employees in Australia by 25% in April. Among other measures, they were even told to take mandatory time off to save the firm money. So with all this being said, you thought they were going to lose money. Well, it turned out they had a pretty good year. They earned $2.5 billion in Australia for their 2020 fiscal year. And this represents growth of about 14% year over year. So now what is Deloitte going to do? They're going to repay 2.5 months of missed pay in addition to 10 days of paid sick leave. So this is pretty good news. The Big Four accounting firms are actually giving back money. And I'm sure this is because employees aren't happy. They learned about the good results and they're asking questions. And I think people have to continue to do this. You have to continue to hold the Big Four accounting firms liable for what they do. And you have to stand up for employee rights and what you think is right. And if you think you deserve more, you need to say that as well. But what the Big Four accounting firms did in Australia was crazy. They cut all these jobs. They cut the pay. Meanwhile, they had an amazing year. So it's finally got some good news here. And I think people in other locations should take the example from Australia and push to have their pay reinstated, to have raises reinstated, bonuses reinstated. There's no way these firms could have record years and not pass it down to their employees. And I think this will continue to happen as the Big Four accounting firms become more integrated into the global response to the pandemic, but just in global initiatives. They're going to make a lot of money because all these global organizations are going to use the Big Four accounting firms to push their initiatives. And that's obviously what happened here. Australia benefited from that, probably not just from business in Australia, but from markets in Asia doing well. So people should not be taking pay cuts during these times. You should hold the Big Four accounting firms accountable and fight for your employee rights. And one of the bad things is they're probably not going to hire all those people they fired. They're not going to hire them back. And hopefully they hire new hires, and hopefully those other people can get jobs somewhere. But even though people are getting their pay back, they're still coworkers that lost their jobs. So that's the update for today. To get future updates, make sure to subscribe to this podcast and support us financially through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. If you can't support us financially, then subscribe to our YouTube and like this video on YouTube. Thanks for listening.